Unspoken Issues.
Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Unspoken Issues.
Don't set the bar too high.
Yeah, fantastic. But we'll stick with that for right now. Maybe we'll adjust that in editing. You never know. I've been wanting to talk something about Image X Month, whether on my podcast or on the Unspoken Issues podcast at some point, because I always really enjoyed that event. So to get the introductions out of the way, I'm Jesse Starcher. That's Chris Armstrong. Chris Armstrong, say hello to the people.
Howdy.
Yeah, so I threw a poll up. I just chose 2 random Image X books. I guess before I even get into that, we should probably talk about what Image X Month was. We have the Image 7, and I'm going to try to name them off the top of my head. We got Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, and is it Wills? No.
Wills Portacio.
Is it Wills? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So there's your Image 7 right there. All 7 left Marvel, created a new company called Image, and the purpose of it was to kind of get away from company-controlled. Let's try that. There's a better way to describe that.
Controlled.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much. So to give you an example, Rob Liefeld creates Deadpool. He does not own that character. Marvel owns that character. So if Rob Liefeld leaves the company, Deadpool stays with Marvel. That's the way it's been for years. The problem is that what they started to see was some of these creations really took off. Not only that, a lot of their contributions to the industry were making millions of dollars, but these creators, these artists, storytellers, they didn't see their piece of the pie. They thought they should be getting something bigger. So
one of the things Rob Liefeld has mentioned on, maybe it's on the Image Revolution or maybe it's other interviews I've seen with him, but like he created X-Force, it was a huge hit. Mm-hmm. And within a year they were putting out X-Force action figures.
Yes.
He was like, I think he was getting royalties off of that. But I mean, it was chump change, it was compared, these were characters he didn't own, but he created all these characters, and now Marvel was making a lot of money off the toys and all this other merchandising stuff, and that was one of the things that kind of clued him in, like, man, if I was doing this on my own, I could be making some real money.
Exactly. You cut out that corporate ownership of it, and instead of getting 15% of the pie, you could potentially get 100% of the pie.
Yeah.
And that was the whole idea behind Image. You bring your creations over here, you completely own them. The only thing that they own is the Image eye that shows up on the front. And I'm sure there's all sorts of other little contract details, but for all intents and purposes, you own that creation. You can do whatever you wanted with that creation. Your work that you put into that creation is going to be equivalent to the amount of money that you make. So if you put your heart and soul into this thing and you make $1,000 off of it, great. Unfortunately, those are the breaks. If you make $1 million off of it, great. I mean, that was that's probably what every creator wanted. There's your basis for Image Comics. Now, Image X Month happens in 94. So I want to give the shortened version from Robservations here. Rob Liefeld has a podcast called Robservations, and he did a whole podcast on Image X Month, the secret history or secret origin of Image X Month, and it's great. I want everybody, please go give it a listen. I always enjoy listening to Liefeld talk. Regardless what you think of his art, I think you should give a shot to listening to just the man talk, because he can tell a story sometimes.
Quite enthusiastic as well.
Very, very, very enthusiastic. So according to the podcast Robservations with Rob Liefeld, the Image X Month starts with Scott Lobdell, who's working for Marvel at the time, coming to Liefeld at a party and saying, "We're going to get you." Marvel's got something up their sleeves. They're tired of taking the backseat to Image. These hot artists, these hot creators, and now granted, Marvel's, I'm sure, still got the top market share, but they know they're getting a big chunk of that is going towards Image now. Mm-hmm. So Marvel's wanting to do something to turn the tables a little bit. I think that concept was going to be Age of Apocalypse. Now, Scott Lobdell doesn't lay it all out on the table like that with Rob. He's just like, hey, we've got something cooking. Be ready. So the next Image meeting, Rob sits down with the founders or at the meeting and says, okay, we've got to come up with something, make sure that we have something out there to compete with this at the time. So they all come up with Image X Month. And the concept of Image X Month is the creators, 6 of the creators were going to switch books. the intent was for it to be a surprise, but it ends up that the retailers, or well, I should say the distributors, they were like, no. You got to tell us who is doing what book. Jim Lee is going to do Savage Dragon, and Eric Larson, who usually does Savage Dragon, will do Wildcats. Liefeld will do Shadowhawk. Valentino will end up doing Youngblood. And then I think it's McFarlane and Silvestri swap. So McFarlane does
just swaps with somebody else.
Yeah, it does one issue. And like I said, it was supposed to be a surprise, but the retailers were like, well, look, we want McFarlane stuff more than we want Liefeld stuff. So you got to tell us who is doing what book so we can order that. So they do let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. So it ends up not being a complete surprise when you go into the store shelves. Although for me personally, I think it was a surprise because I had no idea what was coming. I think Wizard actually did an article on it, but I didn't see it. Mm-hmm. And from what I saw doing my research, it was already jacked up anyway. The only person they got right was Rob Liefeld doing Shadowhawk. So Rob also talks about at the meeting about how they come up with who took what book. And he mentions that Jim Valentino's work apparently people weren't too thrilled about having Jim Valentino do their book. So Rob...
Yeah, I kind of felt bad.
I know, same here.
And it sounded like conjecture, maybe that, Liefeld was kind of assuming this. Maybe he has talked to those guys in the year since then and to confirm it or whatever, but his sense was like nobody else is going to want to do Shadowhawk because they're not going to want Valentino doing their book because they didn't think he was on their level as far as his artwork and stuff like that, which I would say Valentino is probably the weakest of the Image founders as far as his art. Although he is a solid storyteller and I just think he's kind of like a solid artist, but he's not the flashy type that the Image guys were known for. He was more of a traditional artist.
Yeah.
Shadowhawk I think is a really cool design. I like that. At least the first couple of Shadowhawk miniseries that Valentino did, and nobody else really draws Shadowhawk as well as Valentino, which makes sense because it's his character or whatever. But
yeah, sure.
I've seen other renditions of Shadowhawk that it never quite looks right if it's not Valentino doing it. But
yeah, and you got to think about the statement that you said. Oh yeah, Valentino is the weakest of the seven, but you got to think about the seven we're talking about. The other six are lauded to be some of the greatest artists in comic book history. I mean, really, when you say Todd McFarlane, you're going to know who that is. When you say Rob Liefeld, you're going to know who that is. Listening to Rob's observations and Liefeld talk, conjecture is probably a great word for it because his podcast it's fun to listen to, but oh my goodness, if you listen to him tell a story, he's always like the calm and collective one, while these other guys are like, oh, Rob, and every character
it's definitely from his perspective.
Yeah, every character is overblown, but his impersonations of Todd McFarlane is hilarious. Oh my gosh, didn't give me a watch.
Yeah, he's got it down.
Oh yeah, but anyway, okay, so that kind of brings us to our poll. I just grabbed two random ones. So Jim Lee said he was going to do Savage Dragon. So I pulled that one, and then I just grabbed Shadowhawk, Liefeld's Shadowhawk number 0. So it's Savage Dragon number 13, A. I don't know which one's going to be A. I don't know if this one's considered A.
I would think this would have to be A because it was released first.
It was the first. Okay, we'll go with that. Savage Dragon number 13, A, and then Shadowhawk number 0 is what the poll was. So you had to choose the laughing emoji in order to vote for Savage Dragon. And if you chose the angry emoji, appropriate, angry emoji for Liefeld's Shadowhawk, okay? And 75% of the votes at the time we called the poll is Savage Dragon walking away with the win. Liefeld's Shadowhawk coming in with 25% of the votes. That kind of gets us into what we're doing tonight. It's Jim Lee doing Savage Dragon. My personal history with Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon was one of the first Image books that I picked up and faithfully collected the most issues of. I love Supreme, don't get me wrong, but Savage Dragon didn't bring Alan Moore on and make me put the book down. Savage Dragon was consistent. It was Eric Larson, and I loved his art, and I loved what I was getting with Savage Dragon. And I probably have, I think, like the first 70 or 80 issues of Savage Dragon. So this issue, Savage Dragon number 13A, I picked it up off the newsstand and remember reading it and remember being very surprised to see Jim Lee at the helm of Savage Dragon.
The X month did hit in the comic gap for me when I was out of comics for about a year and a half. So I did not know about X Month until probably at least a few years after the fact, when I was going through back issues and trying to fill in gaps in some of my Image comics. I discovered that X Month was a thing that had happened.
Are you a fan of Savage Dragon?
Oh, yeah. I was there on the ground floor for Image. I got all the number ones, when they came out. Pretty much I think I probably had every mini series from the early issues of Image. And Dragon was one of my favorites. I had liked Eric Larson on Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man and whatnot. Dragon was not my favorite at the time. It was, although I liked it. But looking back now, Savage Dragon is definitely, I think, the best of the Image books from those early days. I think the Savage Dragon trade paperback might be the first trade paperback I ever had, which was kind of cool because, the first miniseries was told sort of out of order with flashbacks and stuff. And then when he did the first trade paperback, he put all of the issues, or all the pages in chronological order and added extra stuff to it. So it was like a really cool, neat package. So yeah, I loved Savage Dragon. Once I got back into comics, I jumped right back onto that title and have pretty much collected it ever since. So
okay.
Big Dragon fan.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the creator, Eric Larson, he is the only Image founder that's still around to this day, putting his book out and writing it and illustrating it.
Yeah, he's done every issue, and Jim Lee technically did issue 13, but, several months later, Eric Larson couldn't stand it. So he had to go back and do his own Savage Dragon 13, and which I have a copy of Jim Lee's 13. I don't have a copy of the Eric Larson issue 13. I've read it because it's in the trade paperbacks from that era, but I don't actually have that issue.
That is definitely one of the notes I had down here, was how it ate at him. That his whole plan. I think this is in the notes, not the notes, the letters page of the. I don't know if it's this issue or the 13th issue that he did himself, but his goal was to do 100. This is at the beginning of things. His goal was to do 100 straight issues of Savage Dragon. In one of the interviews that I read, he had mentioned that, okay, well, I've got all these people wanting to do it. I'll go ahead and jump in and do it. But then after that, he's like, well, my goal of doing 100 issues is now out the window. No, wait a second. I can fix this. And so he does his own 13th issue. So in order to keep that 100 issue track, of course, he's way past that now. I mean, way past that. But
yeah, I think it's past 250 now. I can't remember the most recent issue, but he passed 250 last year sometime.
Yeah.
He Larson swapped with Jim Lee and did a Wildcats issue. The Wildcats issue was number 14, and I have a copy of that one. And it's basically a Wildcats versus Freak Force issue.
Yeah.
Which Freak Force is the super team that kind of spun out of Savage Dragon, with a lot of colorful characters from that series. Dragon shows up in it as well, and it's a fun book. It's pretty cool. Shadowhawk number 0, which is the one that the Liefeld issue that came up short in the poll that we did. It's an interesting look. Liefeld talked a lot about the art style he used on Observations.
Pronounce it.
I can't.
I wanted to mention it, but I'm like, I know I'll butcher what it's called. But
it's kind of a watercolor look, similar to what Frank Miller did on Sin City. All of this is colorized, and it's completely different from anything like what Shadowhawk was as a standard. But I mean, that was kind of the point, is everybody jumps onto another book and gives their own flavor to this other person's character or whatever. So it's definitely a Liefeld style version of Shadowhawk, and not a bad issue. Not one of my favorites. Not a great example of Shadowhawk or some of Liefeld's best work even. But the highlight for me. Do you have a copy of issue 0?
I can pull it up here. I was reading like the first few pages. Now, the Shadowhawk that I remember reading back in the day was, a street level vigilante.
Yeah.
And here we open up and he is in a plane with Bloodstrike.
Right. By this time, we had learned the Shadowhawk character. It was a mystery in the original miniseries. Who is Shadowhawk? It was there was like a contest for readers to try and figure it out. But it was revealed in the second miniseries who the character was, and maybe in the third, I'm not sure, but somewhere down the line, it was revealed at some point that the character of Shadowhawk had the AIDS virus.
Yes.
And that was a big part of the cultural zeitgeist at the time. Obviously, the AIDS epidemic. Some would call it insensitive now, probably, but it was a key part of that character. So one of the reasons he's teamed up with Bloodstrike in this issue is because these government spooks are basically telling him, hey, we've got the cure if you'll go on this secret mission, with these assassins or whatever, which was a lot. That issue lost the pulse, so who cares? I really just wanted to point out that there is a Matt Groening pinup of Shadow Bart, which is Bart Simpson in a Shadowhawk armor.
Oh, you're kidding me!
Riding on a skateboard.
Wow,
which is very cool.
Yeah, that's great. Savage Dragon 13. So I'm going to read you the credits here. There are a lot of credits on the inside of this first page letting us know who's taking on the story. So the story is Brandon Choi, story by Brandon Choi, pencils by Jim Lee, finishes. All right, I'm not breaking down the page numbers. I'm just going to give you the names. Finishes by Richard Bennett, Alex Garner, Dan Panosian, Scott Williams. Colors by Monica Bennett and Joe Chiodo. Letters by Richard Starkings and Comic Craft. Computer color by Wildstorm Effects. So there is a large amount of names under finishes for this. One of the criticisms that I saw is the fact that
Jim Lee didn't draw this book.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jim Lee just being washed out by everybody else. If he drew some stuff, it's there, but maybe you can't tell because it looks different underneath the finishes. I don't know. But there's definitely some points where I'm like, is this actually Jim Lee?
You can definitely tell the bones are there for, like, he did the, the breakdowns and the design, probably did the panel layouts and everything. And he was probably mostly just sketching that somebody, the inker basically kind of finished over. There was actually, somebody had posted about this issue, the Eric Larson Savage Dragon fan group on Facebook, and somebody had mentioned that it looks more like Brett Booth than Jim Lee, which it does, although Booth isn't credited with any of this.
I was going to say, yeah, his name's not in here anywhere, I don't think.
Right. And Eric Larson commented, I'll just pull it up, I think I've got it saved here. Brett Booth may have helped draw some things, but Dragon appeared in Brett's book Backlash, and he looked pretty different. I think it was more of a case of Jim doing less than complete pencils and letting Richard Bennett do more of the work. So that's what Larson kind of said about it, and that seems about right. I think at this time, Jim Lee, I think, is pretty much checked out on drawing monthly comics. And
yeah, I think what I read was this was his final monthly comic that he had done, and after this, he doesn't do monthly comics until Heroes Reborn. That's how much of a gap there is. Now he's filling in doing covers and stuff, but he's not, he's not doing monthly comics. So yeah, you're right, man. I mean, he's probably just like, okay, I'm going to take it easy for a little bit. The amount of people that they all had working for their studios, I think, especially when you look at the names that are under Jim Lee for finishes, he's got a studio now that he could just kind of sit back and let the other people do the work, and he'll just make some money on covers and different things like that. But the cover's fantastic. I mean, I love the way this cover looks. One thing that you can tell immediately is the difference between Eric Larson art and Jim Lee art.
It's completely night and day.
Wow. It's like you see Savage Dragon done by Larson, and then you think, okay, well, that probably took him a little while to draw and do everything that he needed to do there. And then you look at Jim Lee and his rendition, that had to have taken like 3 days to do. Just the amount of detail that's put in there, and that's what Jim Lee was known for. But I mean,
and he really gives him, like, he's got a vest, he's got all these straps and the belt buckle with all the pouches, extra guns all over, the gloves, like a lot of extra stuff on Dragon's looking extra. That's what
he is. I think. Yes, he is. Getting the wild storm treatment. All right. Well, I've got the story ready to go if you are.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So just real quick, some of the characters we're going to run into. We got Cole Cash, who is a member of the Wildcats, better known as Grifter. Am I to assume that he's seeing Alicia, the
It
girl?
seems that way. It's not clear, I guess. But
Okay, well, they're having dinner, and they're obviously associates. We'll just put it that way. Clearly, we're going to have the Savage Dragon show up in this comic. Also, his partner, Savage Dragon's partner, Alex. Savage Dragon, a member of the Chicago police force. So is Alex. And we're going to meet some new characters, specifically Demon Seed, who is a crime boss. And we also have couple guys by the name of Renko and another one by the name of Max Prophet. So here we go. Let's get into the story. Downtown Chicago, the Savage Dragon and its partner Alex are staking out a black market Ukrainian arms deal between some Russians, specifically Max and Renko and a few of their flunkies, working for a villain called Demon Seed, and a Chinese gang working for the Savage Dragon villain and Chicago's own Overlord in a restaurant where it just so happens that Cole Cash and a lady by the name of Alicia are sharing each other's company. When the deal goes wrong, Renko opens fire, causing Grifter to leap into action. And he's trading bullets back and forth with Renko, and Renko yells for his buddy Max and says, take him down. So Grifter's kind of surprised and pauses long enough for Max to shoot him. It looks like it hits him right in the head, but it grazes him just enough, doesn't kill him. As Grifter's down, the Russians try to escape, only to have the Savage Dragon appear with backup to arrest them. Unfortunately, before that can happen, some of the gang members have activated some suits that power them up, and as a battle ensues, Dragon starts to face off with Renko. But he's quickly distracted when his partner Alex is shot, giving the Russian gang members the chance to escape. Later, Cole Cash awakens in the hospital, only to be grilled by the Savage Dragon, trying to find out how and why he was at the Chicago restaurant. Seems kind of, he's thinking, oh, this seems kind of fishy. This guy was there and all of a sudden was able to open fire. And so he's trying to figure out what's going on and why he was at the Chicago restaurant, and also accusing Cole of being involved since he had some history with some previous Chicago crime families. Alex, meanwhile, is recovering, and during this, Alicia shows up, telling the Dragon they are working for federal agents investigating the activities of the Chicago Triads. Now, Savage Dragon leaves, and Cole Cash gets up from his bed and preparing to leave as well, saying he has some business to take care of. Meanwhile, on Sears Tower, Renko and Max Prophet, meet with Demon Seed to update him on the fiasco at the restaurant. Grifter heads off to Wrigley Field, one of his old childhood haunts, to meet up with Max Prophet, who happens to be there as well. And then we learn that Prophet is actually Max Cash, Cole's estranged brother.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exactly. Just as Alicia is learning the identity of Max, Renko breaks into her hotel and also learns the surprising news. So Renko finds out that this guy he's been palling around with for a while is the brother of Cole Cash, a member of the Wildcats, the brother of Grifter. So he knows that something isn't right. Grabs Alicia, takes her hostage, and plans to address Max during the arms transaction. Just as Renko is about to kill Alicia, the Savage Dragon and Grifter arrive to rescue her. As a firefight ensues, Renko and Demon Seed are able to acquire the weaponry and attempt to escape. As Renko is on the boat, Grifter grabs a rocket launcher and blows the boat to smithereens. We find out at that point that Dragon's not going to press charges, I assume on Cole or Max. And at the end of the issue, Max and Cole Cash hug each other in a brotherly embrace to end the book. So that is Savage Dragon number 13A. What do you think of the issue, man? I mean, I've got a couple things I want to pick on, but story-wise, art-wise, what's your thoughts?
As a Savage Dragon comic, pretty piss poor. Overall, not a bad comic. Overall, Eric Larson not a fan of this book. He went back to do his own, I think because he wanted to have a consecutive run. But even outside of that, I've seen him badmouth this issue quite often online and stuff. So, and I can see why. It's basically a grifter comic that Savage Dragon guest stars in briefly. Aside from the art issues where Jim Lee is supposed to be the penciler and it's pretty obvious that he's not really doing the heavy lifting, it's got some cool action, especially the shootout in the bar at the beginning. And then there's the big 2-page spread of Dragon and Grifter, coming through the ceiling, skylight with the guns drawn, blowing people away. There's a lot of cool stuff in this book, but yeah, not a great Savage Dragon comic.
So, if you're going to say Jim Lee did the pencils, have you ever noticed Jim Lee draw necks on women like he drew the neck on Alicia sitting at the table? I don't know.
I noticed that as well. Yeah, it's a real go-go gadget neck.
I don't understand. Like, there's something that got
You're
lost.
talking about page 3?
Yeah, where she's looking back at the Chinese mob boss there, whoever's getting in the face of Renko. So that's the first instance of the neck problem. Then we go to the hospital, where Cole is waking up. There's a nurse there, and the nurse that is standing there have you ever seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Oh my.
Okay, so Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the aliens. I just remember the shadow of one walking towards the camera, and the length of the neck was just ridiculous. That's what these ladies remind me of.
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, you're right on.
But it's just like you said, it's a grifter comic with Savage Dragon in it. Specifically, one of the gripes, and I think this was from PipelineComics.com. I was reading a guy who was doing a review of all the X books, but he points out something pretty important, and that is the fact that Grifter grabs a rocket launcher and in front of a policeman tries to commit murder. I mean, we assume that the guy's dead. I don't know if he shows back up later on down the road, but he blows that boat out of the water, and we don't know if he's alive or dead. And Dragon's like, well, I'm not going to press charges. Now,
yeah, definitely not something Dragon would do in his own in an Eric Larson.
Yeah, him and Grifter are Savage Dragon and Grifter are not on the same page with each other. Mm. There's a lot of animosity. I say a lot, but there's enough animosity that Savage Dragon doesn't trust him, and they aren't buddy just right off the get go. But by the end of the book, I mean, they wrap things up nicely with, okay, well, I'm not pressing charges, and here's your brother, and great, let's move on. But you got Grifter. And you got Chicago gangs, Demon Seed. There isn't a whole lot of crazy superheroics. One of the things that I remember reading about Eric Larson was that he loves action, specifically people getting like punched and going through walls. You know, I can remember that being one of the things. He likes to do that. He likes, big muscle bound dudes throwing down, and you don't get a whole lot of that here. It's more of a procedural crime drama.
I can see the appeal to that as like a reader. Like maybe, you want to see like, well, I want to see a Dragon comic through the lens of Jim Lee, like a Jim Lee version. Same as with like the Shadowhawk book. I want to see a Rob Liefeld version of shit. That's kind of maybe what the point of X Month was.
Exactly. It is. Yeah, I can see that.
But it doesn't always translate into particularly good comics.
Yeah. And as a fan, we're sitting here going, yes, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be great. Fantastic. We get to see our favorite creators swap their creations, and we're going to be able to watch what unfolds on the page in that different style. But as a creator yourself, I understand the Valentino stuff that they were talking about. I'm not saying that he was a bad artist or anything, but I'm just saying that if you had not as much faith in the person that you were handing your creation over to, you're going to be kind of worried, like, okay, can he do a good job? This person better do.
You're probably hoping that they're putting in the effort to make sure that, obviously they got, Aunt Nurse Stevens and Alex Wilde, these supporting characters, the captain from Dragon's book. So they did that much at least, but still a lot of the stuff seems kind of out of character in this particular comic.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, for Image X Month, seeing Jim Lee, supposedly, do an issue of Savage Dragon. I was excited back then. It was fun to reread it and see what exactly went down. I'm a crossover guy. Even company, just inside your company. Punisher shows up in an issue of Spider-Man. Fantastic. I can't wait to read it. It's Punisher versus Wolverine. Oh my gosh, put me down. I can't wait to read this. And so Grifter showing up in a Dragon comic. I'll never forget picking up the Savage Dragon comic and seeing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the front of it.
It was awesome.
Yeah, that crossover of those two properties and seeing how they're going to be handled, it generates excitement. So I understand the concept of Image X Month being, that it's a vehicle to drive that excitement. If you listen to Rob's Observations and listen to that Image X Month, you'll hear him gush about Silvestri doing Spawn. And he put his all into that comic. Jim Lee did not do that with Savage Dragon. It just doesn't seem like that's the case here. And yeah, that's not going to translate into a good book. But regardless, hey, if you're a fan, you're a fan. I know at the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't begrudge anyone for like really liking this book. I don't think it's outright terrible. It's just not, it's not a great comic.
yeah. As far as Image X Month goes, well, between these two, between this one and Shadowhawk Zero, I think that people are going to gravitate towards Jim Lee no matter what.
Yeah.
If you see his name attached to anything, immediately they're going to be like, oh yeah, well, Jim Lee's what I vote for. I don't have anything else. Let's pick a panel and tell me where you land. Are you going with the drop in?
I thought about it, but I think I'm actually going to go with the establishing shot, basically, of Demon Seed, who, according to my research, this is his one and only appearance in comics.
Wow.
But he's basically in like a souped-up alien armor with like big bat wings.
Reminds me of Holocaust from Marvel. I don't know.
Very much, yeah. Which, hey, this apparently predates Holocaust because Age of Apocalypse would not actually hit stands till a few months after this, I think.
Oh, that's right.
He's pretty badass looking, kind of generic in a 90s generic armor kind of way, but that's my sweet spot, so I dig it. So that's probably my favorite panel.
Only appearance. And that sucks because, look, I love Image, but when you have things like this where it's like you establish this, I mean, this dude looks awesome. You're like, this guy could really wreck some stuff up. I want to read more of what he's in. And he's nowhere. It's just like, here's this guy. He's coming into Chicago. Now, maybe he just did that to kind of, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Here you go, Eric.
Trying to give Eric Larson a new character to throw out there.
Yeah, somebody he could use. And nope, did not run with that. He was just gone. And it's funny because I was reading Wildcats at the time, and when I saw this guy, I was like, oh, okay, so maybe he's a villain from the Wildstorm universe or the Wildstorm books that I may have missed. But I was reading Wildcats, and I never remember seeing him. That's obviously why.
Apparently this is it.
Wow, that's rough. Well, okay, so you got Demon Seed. Man, I don't want to take the obvious thing here.
Some people could say this is cheesy. Some people might think it's charming. I kind of lean towards charming. There's the scene. There's several examples of this in the book, but I'll just point out this example of the scene in the hospital when Dragon is, trying to get to the bottom of everything, and she pops in and says, from this moment on, you will stop harassing Mr. Cash. Are we clear on this? And then he turns to his captain. We're going to have to listen to this bullcrap, Captain Stewart. And Captain Stewart responds, I'm afraid so. Word came down from City Hall. There's nothing we can do. And then Dragon walks off in a huff, and it's like something straight out of like a late 80s.
Lethal Weapon, buddy.
90s straight to video, or HBO original action movie, like Cracker Jack or one of those, like totally generic, cheesy. It gives me nice nostalgic feelings seeing stuff like that. I hear you. One of my favorite police captains, sorry for this tangent, but
no, go ahead.
Is have you seen So I Married an Axe Murderer?
Oh, yeah, it's been forever for me.
The Mike Myers movie?
I know what you're talking about, yeah, because I remember the VHS cover very well.
It's if you haven't seen it in a while, by all means, I can't recommend it highly enough. I still watch it every few years. It holds up really well. It's really funny. Alan Arkin plays the police captain in that movie, and Mike Myers' best friend, I can't remember, Anthony LaPaglia, I think is the character or is the actor's name. He's a cop, and he's always trying to get the captain to be like a captain on a TV show.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, why don't you ever, pull me into your office and scream at me and demand my badge? And he's like, well, I just find that, a softer touch works better with most of my officers. And he's like completely like a 90s soft-hearted, lug, basically.
Oh,
captain.
That's funny.
That movie's great.
Hey, Paisan! What? You screw up one more time, I'm going to kick your spaghetti-bending butt back to Milan.
Not now.
Was it too much with the ethnic slurs?
No, it was fine, but it's not Paisan, it's Paisan.
Ah. Hey, Paisan.
Well, okay, since you're throwing yours out there, I'll throw mine. And mine is easily the captain from Last Action Hero, which I don't know if you've seen that movie.
It's been a lot. I'm the opposite. It's been probably 20 years since I've watched that.
Last Action Hero, one of my favorite movies of all time with Arnold Schwarzenegger. In the movie, Schwarzenegger walks in there and he knows he's just going to get reamed by the captain because that's every time he walks in there, the captain is going to ream his butt. But as he's sitting there and he's just going off on Arnold's character, Jack Slater, they have TVs behind him. And behind the captain is a TV. Why in the world it's on at the time, you have no idea. But as this guy is just going off, there's like volcanoes erupted on the TV and like all sorts of mass destruction to just kind of to add to the mood of the captain and who's enraged at that time.
You stripped the belt on and cut the toes I can take from you. I got the California Ranger cousin doing an army of virgin and a Darren hand French doing an army of virgin in my first cinema. Tiny Tim and Steph going to the total. So what? You ball peen jackametas. I'll strip the belt on and cut second toes I can take from you. You know, you take the man to married, which you're never going to down the beach, go down the beach. You know, you take the chicken off the back and stick it out. Well, see if this is clear enough. Give me your badge. And this time you won't get it back.
But anyway, good stuff. I'm going with the 2-page spread. I mean, there's nothing else you could pick out of this book. Just be like, oh yeah, that stands out. Demon Seed's a good pick. But yeah, the 2-page spread is what this whole thing was about, man. That was probably like, Lee was like, okay, I get the 2-page spread and then I get the cover. And you guys can do the rest. We'll do it. But yeah, that's beautiful. Grifter was easily one of my favorite Wildcats when I was reading Wildcats. I loved
Grifter's
Wildcats.
Cool.
Yeah, I thought, and of course, to this day, DC proper, I think he's one of the more common Wildstorm characters that you see around. Okay, well, let's get into the comments here. I want to go over to the Facebook page and just see, because we actually had a lot of good feedback. A lot of people chiming in, letting us know what they were picking. Total of 9 comments on here. All right, so Antoine Rogers, top fan of the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. Savage Dragon. But the Shadowhawk look and feel of the story was also pretty cool. Jim Lee's take on Dragon had him more grounded, with the use of guns, straps, pouches on him, and working with backup cops. Larson did those things too, but it looked realistic in this issue. Larson's Dragon, it may not look completely realistic, and it almost feels kind of like a cartoon at sometimes.
Sure.
But I can see the legitimacy of Lee's pencils and his art. So Dan McCullough says, I have that Savage Dragon signed by Jim. Signed. Nice. Jason Fedora says, that Shadowhawk by Rob looks cool. I like Savage Dragon, period. Corey Arsenal, in his podcast, and we might have mentioned this, in his podcast, Liefeld explained that he wasn't good at drawing the shiny armor, so that's why he did the story black and white Sin City style. Stephen Williams, top fan. I remember Eric Larson hated this and made his own Savage Dragon issue number 13. Yep, sure did. Ethan Summerson, this was, I think, one of the first comments I had seen. Ethan Summerson says, yeesh, there's more likes than angries. Maybe he's a Liefeld fan, and he doesn't understand why people were liking the post and not voting for Liefeld here. Yeah, at that point, that's when I put the landslide gif, because it was not looking good for Rob Liefeld and Shadowhawk number 0. And that was early on in the game. I think that's it, man. That's it for the comments. I appreciate everybody getting in there. Usually what we do when we post a poll, me and Chris are going to share it, and we have a couple other pages that we kind of frequent, and sometimes we'll share that too. But I do want to give shout out to Michael Crilly for sharing the post and the picture there. We appreciate it.
I think that's it. We were a little hard on this one. I don't hate it, and I don't begrudge anybody who likes it or anything. Again, just not my favorite, early Image era comic. We like to celebrate the 90s comics.
That's right. Exactly.
For the most part. But.
We do. And we're here to celebrate, ladies and gentlemen. We love 90s comics. I'm glad you guys picked this one, because I think the next poll that we do may end up being another 2 Image X books. I've got some ideas on what I'm going to throw out there. So we may also kind of play with the idea of doing polls a little bit differently. We'll see how that runs. But for right now, just kind of keep your eyes on the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. Make sure to go check out the UnspokenDecade.com and check out all of the articles over there. We've got your 90s covered. Shout out to the W2Mnet.com. They host the podcast. You can punch in W2Mnet.com into YouTube. Probably find a lot of our old episodes on there. And any podcast catcher that you have, you can also check that out there. Chris Armstrong, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to call you up and talk to you about Liefeld?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BrodyMan34. So also on the UnspokenDecade.com. I've got a Savage Dragon write-up on there from a couple years ago where I just kind of gush over how much I love the Savage Dragon for several paragraphs.
Very nice. Yeah, definitely go check that out. All right. Well, yeah, you can follow me at Stiznarkey on Twitter if you do so like. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, have a good one. Bye-bye.